Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the Case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining me at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. Okay, this week we're going to talk about kind of the nature of what is convincing and what is not, and how we make a case and get to a point where we can actually be certain or certain enough to make a decision about whether something is true. So really this show is really about how do we know when we've got enough evidence to believe Christianity is true? And I'll play a short clip from some of the kinds of corroborative evidence that I would use in a case. But before I do that, I just want to talk about, I post on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter at J. Warner Wallace, you probably know that I'm always posting the latest evidential apologetics blogs from all around the world. I read about 600 or 400 to 600, depending on the day, apologetics blogs. I just scan through these blogs looking for the best dozen or so posts on evidential apologetics. So if you're looking for a Drudge Report on evidential apologetics, I hope that my Twitter feed at J. Warner Wallace is that. So if you're using social media, please follow me on Twitter. I got a response this week from somebody who kind of argued, hey, there's a problem with evidentialism because in the end, evidentialism can only, really give you a certain level of probability, and you can never really be certain whether or not something is true based on evidentialism. You can only be at a certain probability. Well, that's true, but let's think about this for a second. If you were to say that, no, I cannot make a decision that something is true, I cannot go forward affirmatively with something unless I have 100% certainty. Oh my gosh. There's about nothing in your daily life for which you have 100% certainty. You've got good reasons to believe something is true, but can you be certain? Everyone I've ever talked to who was cheated on by their spouse and was shocked by it, they didn't realize that 2 days before everything was just fine. And then they discovered this shocking reality that their spouse was cheating on them. So how much certainty should we have? Do we live every day as though we in fear of not having 100% certainty, or are we justified in living each day with a certain amount of probability, a certain amount of certainty that gives us confidence enough to move forward? As a matter of fact, there are standards of proof in trials of one nature or another. If you're doing a criminal trial or a civil trial or a child custody trial, whatever it may be, there are different levels of proof that are offered. And in criminal trials like my own, the kind of work, the standard of proof, the SOP, is beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond a possible doubt, because you could never get beyond a possible doubt. There are always going to be unanswered questions in every worldview. Let me put it this way. No one holds a worldview for which they have perfect knowledge. Everyone holds a worldview for which they have less than perfect information. As a matter of fact, we all hold a worldview with some things just unanswered. As an atheist, I also held a worldview in which I could not give you really certainty about how the universe came into being, how life originated in the universe, a number of things that were problematic for me holding an atheistic worldview if I needed 100% certainty to move forward. So this idea that you can't trust evidentialism because it can't give you 100% certainty is just ridiculous. As a matter of fact, what we're looking for is certainty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, you might ask, well, what's the reason? What is that level? How do I get there? I'm going to tell you that I typically will not talk to juries about what it is. This process is kind of fuzzy, right? I can tell you this, though, when I describe it for people, that reasonable doubts are those doubts that are grounded in evidence. They have to be grounded in evidence, so they're not going to be reasonable. So, for example, if you said, well, couldn't the multiverse theory explain the fine-tuning we see in the universe when we see a lot of amazing fine-tuning in the universal constants that are required for life to emerge in our universe, and from the weak force, the weak nuclear force, the strong, all the different forces in the atom, all the different forces in gravity, all the different forces, even the positioning of galaxies, the positioning of of systems within those galaxies, the positioning of planets within those systems, the position of the planets in rotation around that sun. All these things are incredibly fine-tuned in order for life to emerge. The odds of this happening are dramatically low. And this is why lots of folks have kind of, I think, started to look for alternative theories on how we could account for this amazing fine-tuning of so many constants that have to be tuned within a razor's edge of specificity in order for us to emerge as humans to even talk about this fine-tuning. So how do we explain it? Well, one of the things that's been offered is multiverse theory. Look, if there are an infinite number of universes all emerging, one of them is likely to have life, because just given the vast opportunities, the vast number of chances that life could emerge, of course one's going to emerge with life. So it's not all that special, is it? But this idea that we are part of a collection, a multiverse collection, how much real evidence do we have for such a theory? I mean, honestly, how much empirical evidence do we have for this theory? It's really lacking in its evidential support. It's got some great, I mean, there's many people who actually, as many physicists who dislike multiverse theories as there are those who, as a matter of fact, the Big Bang cosmology, forget about multiverse theory, has really been the standard cosmological model for a long time. And most people, I would say, reject multiverse theory based on its lack of evidence. There's a debate between those who are trying to find a theory of everything and those who believe that we don't need a theory because we've got so many universes, one's going to eventually pop into existence. I mean, there's a debate between physicists about this. So my point here is this. Do we have good evidence to support the existence of multiverses, or do we really just think it's a theory that is interesting? It's certainly possible, because anything's possible. But is it reasonable? Well, what makes something reasonable is its grounding in evidence. Is it evidentially reasonable, or is it just speculatively possible? And that's the difference here. So I would look at a theory, if someone offered another theory about a murder case I'm working, is that theory being offered supported by any of this evidence? Or is that just one of these things they want to throw out as a red herring to kind of distract you from what is supported by the evidence? Because in the end, if you can make a list of your doubts, and you realize that the doubts, some of those doubts you have are not supported by any of the evidence, well, then you can put them in a separate category. They're not reasonable doubts, they're just possible doubts. Possible doubts don't count in jury deliberation. That's the first thing. So as we kind of look at today's show and think about, well, what kind of evidence could we have? I'm going to show you a couple of forms of evidence by way of a talk that I give that just looks at two forms of corroborative evidence to examine whether or not the claims made about Christianity have been corroborated by something outside of Scripture. There's a couple of ways to get at this, right? One form of corroboration is simply physical evidence. And we could look at some forms of physical evidence to corroborate the statements of an eyewitness. Another form of corroboration is eyewitness accounts that come alongside the eyewitness, additional direct evidence. You can have indirect physical evidence or direct eyewitness statements. These are two ways we can corroborate. If I came in and told you something was true and you weren't sure if I was telling you the truth, you could look for physical indirect evidence that would support my claim, or you could look for direct evidence of eyewitnesses. Other eyewitnesses said, yeah, I was there with Jim and it happened just the way he said it did. Okay, that's two ways to come at this. Well, we're now going to look at a case, the case of Christianity, a series of events that occur 2,000 years ago. So we're going to have to understand that anytime you're looking at anything in the ancient past, the level of corroboration you're going to have is going to decrease as each year travels into the past. So the older an event, the harder it's going to be to corroborate. Make sense? If it happened yesterday, I can still talk to people who are alive who could tell me what happened. So given that this is an ancient event, I'm going to provide for you in this next clip from a talk I did at Green Bay Church. And by the way, if you're in the Green Bay area, the Green Bay Community Church is an excellent place to learn, to grow in your understanding. And they have people like me come in repeatedly to make the case for why we believe this is true. So it's a great place to go. And it's just a fun place to be. And also, I like these clips because although they're not perfect in terms of quality, they're good enough for you to see what I'm talking about. And also, they are just fun to preach or teach in the round. And they always set the room up in a circle for me whenever I go. So it's just fun to be there. But aside from that, I want you to take a look at two forms of corroborative evidence. One, which is in that first category we talked about, indirect physical evidence. The other one is going to be in terms of direct eyewitness testimony alongside. So we're looking at ancient testimony. Now, what you're going to hear here are a couple of ideas, one of which is I call touch point evidence. You'll hear me talk about it here, and I'll talk more about it after the break. Enjoy the video. How do we verify something? Well, sometimes if a witness says something, I'll verify it by using some other piece of evidence.
If I was to, let's say we had a bank robbery, you'll be my teller, okay? And you'll be my witness. And I came into the teller, I'm the bad guy, and I put my hand on, I said, give me all your money with a gun in my hands. And you saw that, and you told me that he came in and leaned over the counter and he said, give me all your money. How could I verify that? What could I look for to verify that claim from the witness? Fingerprints. Where? On the counter. They better be in that direction, right? They better match what she says. If they do, I'll have corroborative evidence. But did you notice something? The fingerprints will tell me nothing about whether I had a gun. The fingerprints will tell me nothing about what I said. All corroborative evidence is touch point evidence. It gives you one small piece from which you infer the larger account. Make sense? That's important because we can do something with the scripture as well to look and see if there's any corroborative evidence. But remember, all corroborative evidence is touch point evidence. So instead of using fingerprints here, I think we can use archaeology to do just this work. And so if you'd have gone back 150 years and asked people to assess Luke's reliability, a lot of scholars would have said Luke is unreliable. He mentions things for which there are no outside support. I'll just give you a brief list of some of the things that were doubted either in Luke's gospel or in John's gospel by skeptics until in the last 100 years, we've now discovered the archaeology to support the claim. This happens all the time. People will have a skeptical doubt and we'll discover it in archaeology and put it to bed. And I could do this all day with you. I could go through one after the other pieces of archaeological support for things that Luke has written. There are volumes and 2 really good websites online that can help you find this kind of corroborative evidence. By the way, my Mormon family, and I take trips to Salt Lake City every year with the missions team. Do you think there's any archaeological support for the 1,000-year history from 600 BC to 400 AD that's mentioned in the Book of Mormon on this continent? Is there a single foundation, a single city, a single sword, a coin, a single name from the Book of Mormon that's inscribed anywhere on the continent? I don't expect to have every single detail from the Bible corroborated by archaeology, but I expect something. There's nothing for the Book of Mormon, not a single thing. You cannot write a volume of anything related to archaeology in the Book of Mormon. So as I was kind of examining this for the first time, these 2 books, simultaneously, the same stuff that gave me confidence in Scripture really destroyed my confidence in the Book of Mormon. We can have good confidence in this kind of touch point. But how about this? What if I caught the guy who did the robbery, right? And I interviewed him. And I said, hey, I know you did that robbery. I wasn't even in the bank. Dude, I got videotape of you in the bank. I don't really have that. I just tell him that. Okay, well, I was in the bank, but I wasn't doing a robbery. Well, you walked over and you wrote a demand note at that counter. No, I was writing a deposit slip. Oh, dude. Then you took the demand note over to the teller. You screamed at her, pointed a gun. No, I was just upset that I forgot my ID out in the car, so I went outside to get my ID. Now, has he actually confessed to doing a robbery in the bank? No. But will I use those statements against him in trial? Oh, yeah. Because he's put himself at the time of the crime, at the scene of the crime, just trying to describe it a different way. These are reluctant admissions that I can use in trial. It turns out there are many first-century reluctant admissions about Jesus. People who are not Christians, who don't believe in Jesus, but who will have to reluctantly admit certain facts in denying Jesus. Let me give you an example of this. Here's a guy named Thallus, who in the first century, he's writing and he's talking about the darkness that occurred at the crucifixion, and he denies that it's supernatural. He says it's just an eclipse of the sun. See it there on the bottom? Just an eclipse of the sun.